Good morning. Looks like we're all present. So I'm going to continue with the identity of relative and absolute. This is the fifth uh, part. And today I'll talk about within light, there's darkness, but do not try to understand that darkness. Within darkness, there's light, but do not look for that light. Light and darkness are a pair, like the foot before and the foot behind in walking. So this is kind of a statement of the identity of relative and absolute, which is the title of the verse of the chant, which we did this morning. So darkness is like the absolute, and it is an expression of what people experience when they realize the absolute. But it's not just blackness, but what it means is that there's no differentiation. Everything is one, so there aren't any gradations or anything like that. In the experience of the absolute, the self drops away. There is no body or mind, as Dogen says, and there's no other either. So everything is unified, it's one. So if it's one, how can you distinguish things? As soon as you start extinguishing, that's not the darkness, that's the light. And the light is the diversity, so that's where all of the mountains and rivers and people and animals and plants arise. So it says within light there's darkness, but don't try to understand that darkness. Well, how are you going to understand it? Because there's nobody there to understand, So, but it's not like it wipes out all of the manifold things as they're there, but you just aren't present at that moment. And within darkness, there's light, but don't look for that light. So within darkness, there is all the manifold things. But if we look at it, then we're obfuscating the base or the ground of being, which is that unity from which everything arises. So in the Heart Sutra, we say form is emptiness and emptiness is form. So here we could say that light is darkness and darkness is light in the same way. And this is a fundamental teaching of Buddhism, and for the Buddha, it's not a teaching; it's a fact. It's an experiential thing. So, according to my teacher, Shishin Roshi, the most fundamental principle in our practice is faith in the three treasures. Now, the three treasures, of course, are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and they have different aspects, but the Buddha treasure, we could say, is the oneness or the absolute, and the Dharma treasure is the relative or the manifold or diversity, and the Sangha treasure is the harmony between the two. So in these lines, the darkness, as I said, is the absolute, which is the Buddha treasure, and the light is a relative, which is the Dharma treasure, and the word is equality or harmony, and that's the Sangha treasure. So, like in the Heart Sutra where it says form is emptiness, that means the relative is the absolute, and the is the harmony between the two of them. That's the Sangha. So, since, according to the Buddha, who said that everybody without exception has the wisdom and virtue of the Buddha, everyone is the Buddha. That's an interesting exercise to do when you go to the supermarket, is to reflect that everybody's the Buddha. Everybody who's stocking the shelves, everybody who's putting items from the shelf into their shopping bags, everybody who's checking you out, and people who are self-checking themselves, and the pharmacist and the butcher and the baker and the people who are in the deli. It's an interesting exercise. How would you function if you saw everybody as the Buddha? Would that change the way that you're functioning? Yeah. So, and everyone is the Dharma too. So, in that case, if we look at it, the three treasures are really altogether just one treasure. And that treasure is each one of us, and everyone else, and everything else. So when we realize this fact, as my Shishin Roshi used to often say, what is there to complain about? When we realize this and are full and complete, and we're able to be peaceful and free. But instead of coming from a position of being full and complete, many people come from the position of being empty or lacking, not quite appreciating what we have. So what distinguishes an optimist from a pessimist? And as I've often said, as we continue to practice, it's not that the details of our life change, but it's our attitude that changes. And there's a marvelous story, which some of you may know about, I've told before about these twins, where one was an optimist and one was a pessimist. And on their birthday, the father was trying to equalize things between them. So for the pessimist, he gave all these wonderful presents, and in his room, just left him in his room. They had separate rooms. And in the room of the optimist, he put a pile of horse manure. And then he was checking in on him, and he looked, and the pessimist was crying. And he said, "Why are you crying? You have all of these wonderful presents." And he said, "Yeah, but there's nobody here to play with me." And so he went to the room of the optimist, and he was gleefully throwing horse manure around the room. And the father said, "What's going on?" He says, "Well, with all of this horse shit, there has to be a pony here somewhere." So each of us, we have to look, and see what is it in our lives, so that we focus our attention on certain things, and we have to look at what is it that's holding us back in the practice. So this attitude runs very deep, and it's not as obvious as the story of the twins, but we all have things that we're holding on to that we don't want to let go of. So we have to start looking about, some of our behavior, why, for example, if some people laugh nervously when things start getting too intimate, or why do you feel that maybe there's not enough to go around, maybe not enough love or enough appreciation? So we're all composed of the same building blocks of matter, whether neutrons, protons, electrons are the stable ones, but there's all kinds of unstable particles that are constituents of these particles. And there's more than when I studied physics, but there were mesons and photons and quarks. But depending upon the conditions, there are these particles come together and form rocks and plants and animals and humans. And each one is different. So we're composed of exactly the same thing, but we manifest in different ways, depending on what the conditions are. Actually, there was a bizarre theory I heard when I was a physicist, and somebody's trying to explain why every electron is identical to every other electron. Aren't there differences among electrons? And the theory was that they're all the same electron, but it's going backward and forward in time and just intersecting the time-space continuum, in billions and billions or more than that, different ways. So the electrons in my body are the same as electrons in your body. The same one. They're just one electron. But that was a bizarre theory, but I don't know if it ever got any traction. But I remember one time I was at Dido Laurie's place, his Zen Mountain Monastery in Mount Tremper, upstate New York. And he had a program going on, and Robert Thurman, who was a professor, I think, at Columbia and a Buddhist scholar, was speaking. But this Robert Thurman has a daughter named Uma Thurman, who's a famous actress and rather gorgeous actress. And when we were at this meeting, a rumor was going around that his daughter was going to make an appearance, and people were quite excited about that. And when she didn't show, one of the students said, masked his disappointment and said, well, she's just a collection of 5 heaps, 5 skandhas, and that's what we say in the chant of the Heart Sutra, Avalokiteshvara doing deep Prajnaparamita, so emptiness of the 5 conditions. That's what they're. The 5 conditions are 5 skandhas. That's what gives rise to each one of us, So she's just 5 skandhas like everybody else. But then somebody else says, yeah, but what 5 skandhas? So things, even though we all are the same, we're different. But, and since everything's empty, nothing's fixed, things arise according to the conditions. And that's what our karma is. But like everything else, karma is empty and it's not fixed. So when we transform our attitudes, our reactions, our beliefs, our actions, we are transforming our karma. And we can transform the past and the future. Say, well, the past is gone, you can't transform it. Well, think about it for a minute. I've had people who have blamed all of their problems on their parents, and then when they practice and start to realize that they're responsible for their whole life, they're not as angry or judgmental about their parents. So right there, that's changing the past. Yeah. And of course, who knows what the truth is, because we all have our own perspectives. So Sekito Kisen, who wrote the identity of relative and absolute, he said, don't be attached to the darkness. So, you know, there's also the light, so we have to see both of them. We need both light and dark to be complete, and the same can be said of yin and yang. We need both. So there's a story of a Chinese Zen master named Shikan. He's a venerable ancestor in the Rinzai lineage, and he was Rinzai's disciple. And when he leaves Rinzai, he goes to visit the renowned nun Matsuzan, at which time Matsuzan asked him, where have you come from? And Shikan says, the entrance of the road. A very concrete answer, but maybe a little bit curt. And she didn't mean, where have you come from now? I mean, it was a Zen question. Where have you come from? And she says, then why have you come here without anything on? So she's suggesting that his reply, the entrance to the road, is a bit too brazen. It's not covered up. You come here showing yourself, to be a bit rude. And he had no words, so he just prostrated himself, bowing as a disciple to teacher. And then so he acknowledged what she says to him about being a bit rude. And then he asks her, what is Matsu-san? He's asking her, who are you? And she says, Matsu-san never shows a peak. And it's kind of a wordplay because her name Matsu-san means bottom of the mountain. So she never shows the peak. So it means that she never expresses herself directly, so that she never is rude. But if she's in a position of strength, she never exploits it. It's a kind of a feeling. And so it's kind of cultural too. I mean, Americans, we really want people to be direct and straight, but as you see, a lot of Zen masters kind of express themselves poetically, like she does. Matsuzan never shows the peak, and so then the Shikan persists, and he says, "Just who is the person within the mountain?" And she wants to know what she's really like, and she says it is beyond appearances, such as those of a man or a woman. In other words, she's transcending male and female, transcends all categories. And so she's a real person who will not be dismissed as just as a woman, and particularly in the patriarchal society. And Shikan says, and why do you not change your form? And she says, I am not the ghost of a wild fox. What might I change? So she bested him at every place. So this little interchange shows how Shikan eventually accepts Matsu-zen as someone who can teach him the truth. So whether she was a man or a woman. And later, when he became a teacher himself, he preached to the assembly. He said he studied with Rinzai and he studied with Matsu-zen. He said, I got half a dipper at old Papa Rinzai's place, and I got half a dipper at old Mama Matsu-zan's place. Making a dipper with both halves, I finished drinking and have arrived directly at the present. I'm completely satisfied. So I bring this up, because we have to see both the dark and the light. And like it says in the verse, all pairs are like a foot before and a foot behind in walking. So, but which foot is before and which foot is behind when we're walking? So as long as you're walking, there's no foot before and foot behind. It's just walking. So if you're really aware of your right foot and your left foot, what are you doing? Are you walking? It's amazing when people start to concentrate on their breath when they practice, they forget how to breathe, you know? And what I often tell people to do is put their hand on their abdomen. And when you breathe, you feel the rising and falling. But when you breathe in, air goes in and the abdomen expands. And when you breathe out, the abdomen deflates or contracts. And that's a good place to put your attention, is feeling the rising and falling of the abdomen. But I've had people come into me and say, when I breathe in, my abdomen falls. When I breathe out, it rises. And I said, what are you doing? You're just too focused and concentrated on your breathing that you're trying to figure out what it is, and you're just not breathing naturally. It's like the guy who had the long beard, and somebody asked him if he sleeps with his beard over the covers or under the covers. And he didn't know. So when he went to bed that night, he put his beard over the covers, and he didn't feel right to him. He couldn't sleep. So he took his beard and put it under the covers, and couldn't sleep again. So he spent the whole night just taking his beard back and forth, over the covers. So we can get so, obsessed with some of these things, just and talking about the foot before and the foot behind and walking, when that's how Bernie Glassman, the first Dharma successor of Maizumi Roshi, my teacher, got attracted to him. He went to sit at a small temple in it's called Little Tokyo in Los Angeles. It's a Japanese section there downtown. And they have a Soto Zen temple there, and he went and meditated with him, and they started doing walking meditation called Kinhin. And Bernie asked him, what's the meaning of this Kinhin, this walking meditation? Maizumi Roshi said, when you walk, you walk. And Bernie decided he was in the right place after he heard that. So when you sleep, you sleep. When you walk, you walk. Yeah. So when we look at light and dark, it's relative too. At night, when you go outside in the backyard, you might think it's dark because you came from a lighted room. However, if you just emerged from a cave, you would think that it was light. So it's all relative, even to light and dark. I mean, as far as our practice goes, Maizumi Roshi used to say, in a dark cave, you can light an incense, and the glow from a tip of an incense will give you some sense of what you can see. He said that's kind of when you're starting to wake up, but you want it to be brighter so you can see more. But the glow from a tip of incense will dispel the darkness of a cave that hasn't had any light in it for 100,000 or 1,000,000 years, So we say, enlightenment is to lighten the way. But it's funny too that darkness represents the absolute of seeing the absolute, which is essential. So right now, are we dwelling in the absolute or the relative? In darkness or light?